Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Cal Royal part number ESBUL50. This is a US26D heavy-duty commercial surface bolt in a plated satin chrome finish. This is an incredibly common sort of commercial surface bolt that you'll see installed in a variety of different orientations. Pairs of doors, single doors, made of steel. They could also call this 652 finish, because that means steel-based with a satin chrome finish. They're just calling it US26D, and that's okay too. But it'd be, because it's made of steel, they could certainly call it the BHMA number 652. That would be more accurate, because US26D doesn't tell us the base material. Is it made of brass or bronze? Well, is it made of brass or steel or some other material? But anyway, it's a decent-looking piece of equipment. Very common on those pairs of doors. It's even UL labeled. It's listed, and it has a label on it, as you can see. Now, where would you need that? Well, you would need that on any door that you're installing this on that's fire-rated. Going to be a very limited application of where you'll use a manual surface bolt in a fire-rated application, primarily electrical, mechanical, plumbing sort of doors, MEP rooms, where there's pairs of doors, whether it be in a condo building or a hospital. They're fire rated. The active door has a closer. The inactive door is not obligated to have a closer and can use a manual bolt, a flush bolt or a surface bolt. And that technically violates the requirement of a fire door being self-closing, self-latching, and free swinging. Well, it violates the self-latching part, because you have to manually throw that bolt. But the logic is, for that application, that sort of closet or room where there's no human occupancy on the other side, that it's always manned. Someone is at the door. You're in the room conducting work, and when you're done, you close the doors, you secure them, and you lock them. So they're never left unattended is the logic, and that's where you'll see this being permissible for pairs of doors. If the rule of thumb is, if there's human occupancy or the capacity for it, from what I've been told by people who are door inspectors, is that it would have to be self-latching if there's occupancy, human occupancy, or the potential for it. I've had people say that they've done these electrical closets and then they come back 6 months later to do a follow-up inspection, and the building engineer has moved his couch in there, his TV in there, and now it's the break room. That's not okay. So anyway, this is what is called a surface bolt. This is probably, if someone were to ask you for a modern style surface bolt, they may be referring to this. You have different bolts that you'll use, barrel bolts and and other sorts of cane bolts, chain bolts that you'll use. But this is a pretty typical item, and it is because it's inexpensive and it's effective. So when they say it's 8-inch, that's the overall length of the business end of the bolt, 8-inch. It's going to have a specific projection, and that projection is governed by how far this mounting pad can move. It's got that stop around the back, and that dimension is probably going to be about 3/4, maybe 7/8. Let's take a look. So this would ultimately be your projection. Yeah, so about 13/16. Okay, right there. The width of the bolt, about 3/4, maybe 11/16. The thickness is about 3/16. They weigh about 1 pound each, just shy, like 0.98 pound. This is going to include we would call this a rim strike or a surface strike, is where you would use this. You would use this probably on a pull side application. Then you have the mortise strike, that's here. Let's take some dimensional properties. Overall length of the mortise strike, about 2 13/16 by 3/4. The angle strike or the rim strike would be 2-inch by 3/4 inch by about 11/16. Now, they give you these two separate strikes, and by the way, screws are included. They have it'd be a wood thread along with a machine thread. So for either wood or metal applications, if it's metal, you're clearly going to need to drill and tap. Hopefully it's reinforced. So where are you going to use these two separate strikes? Let's take a look at some supporting documentation in the item itself, and then talk about those strike plates, those strikes as well. So this is the item that we are looking at, the surface bolt that's here. And the extended description says, offers tamper-resistant mounting. I suppose that's true in the sense that from the exterior, you don't have access to the heads of the screws, nor would you have any evidence that a surface bolt is actually installed. Available with mortise and universal strikes, well, they're both included. The dimensional properties are here, plated satin chrome. The cut sheet is here, and there's also a link to the template, which we'll go over in a moment, which is included, by the way. Specifically designed for use on double doors, this heavy-duty surface bolt has precision guides and allows one door to stay inactive while the other is active. Perfect for use on French patio doors as well as library or study doors. I agree, this might be a bit commercial looking for a residential application. You can use it for in-swing or out-swing applications, and that's because both mortise and universal strikes are included. And I don't see here that they... Oh, right there. Yeah, UL listed. I don't understand their logic. ESBUL50 is for a 12-inch length. Far less common than 8-inch, but nonetheless, you should consider it. In my opinion, it does lift the knob up a little bit higher from the floor when you're locking that bottom door, allowing you to have one hand on the trim of the door and then the other to activate the bolt, and then conversely, a little easier reaching up to the top of a 12-foot door. You would think it would be ESBUL12 and ESBUL8 or 08 perhaps, but nonetheless, this is where we are. They're showing the mortise strike here. Then there's a template which is included, which is here. There we go. We'll give you all the dimensional properties of all the material that we've gone over. And they do show where you're going to install what they are calling the universal strike. But they don't show us anywhere to install the mortise strike. So a universal strike is, I called it a rim strike because the bolt would be installed around the rim or perimeter of the door. This would be attached to the face of the frame or to the face of the opposite door. You can also see how they're installing it for an out, and this is an in-swing application, by the way. You can also see how they're installing it for an out-swing application, so that's ingenious to use it in this regard as well. So this door can swing out, and this door can swing in. Let's take a little closer look at that. The only issue that I find here is that 1/8 of an inch standard is the inset from the face of the frame to the face of the door. If you have something that is not within a 32nd of an 1/8 of an inch, you're going to need to reconsider how you will mount that for an in-swing door without altering the strike or padding the installation of possibly the surface bolt. Or if it's a flush frame installation or a flush installation, yeah, you might need to contend with that. So let's take a look at where that might be installed. So I believe that they elegantly showed how to install the universal strike. So in a mortise application, you could simply just mortise the strike. Okay, here is what you could simply do. You could also, and then what I'm saying is your bolt is going to sit here. And your mortise strike can sit in here. Okay. They also did show you how you would take that universal strike and mount it here. But in terms of an in-swing application, I don't really see how that will work for you with this mortise strike. If you have an in-swing door, there's really nowhere to install that, in my opinion, because you're probably not going to be able to. The issue with installing it is you're going to end up trying to mortise that right here in this area, and then that bolt's going to need to fit in here. So that might be a bit of a challenge depending on how much of the stop you wish to chisel away if you can, or surface mount it, which is another option. If it's a hollow metal frame, you're of course going to be you'll be void in this area. So depending on where the stud is, you might need other screws to be able to run that into the stud. Okay. So the point of the matter is, using these two strikes, with the possibility that you may need to alter something, you'll be able to make this work. However, in 99% of instances, what you're going to pull out of the box is going to work just fine for your application. Okay. Be mindful that you have that 13/16 of an inch total projection, so that if you are going from the bottom of the door to a sill or a threshold, make sure that you have enough projection or throw on the bolt in order to provide you an adequate engagement with the strike. Okay. Now, the cut sheet we've gone over. Now there's a link here to the manufacturer's page, and you can pull that up. And from that page you can view not only all of the Cal Royal products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to their full product catalog. A very handy document. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Now in conclusion, if you're looking for just an inexpensive surface bolt, like this client likely is, you really have no fault with it, in my opinion. We've sold bushel loads of these over the years, and is very typical and common for use in generally pairs of hollow metal doors. That Cal Royal catalog is representative of a book that 25 years ago used to be that thick, and now is significantly thicker. They are forever evolving their product line, and I would say that Cal Royal is a very comprehensive, complete, full spectrum provider of commercial and residential builders hardware. You will most definitely find most of everything that you can possibly use on a job there. When it comes to commercial work, you'll be able to pull hinges and lock sets and door closers and exit devices, weather stripping even. They don't have a very comprehensive offering of weather stripping and kick plates and lights and louvers, but they have the regular, most common material. When it comes to residential hardware, you'll find residential flush bolts and handrail brackets and ball catches, things of that nature. Not a comprehensive provider of that material, but they have the regular material. When it comes to their inventory, they almost always have an absolute, thoroughly adequate quantity of material on hand ready to ship. And that's because they're importing from Asia. They're bringing container loads over of material. So they either have several hundred or thousand of what you need, or they're 16 weeks out. But the latter rarely happens with Cal Royal. If you have any questions on the Cal Royal, this is their part number ESBUL50 surface bolt, or any other Cal Royal product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.